Razer's new Blade 17 is here, and I've tested everything in depth to help you decide if it's a gaming laptop worth buying. My Blade 17 has Intel's Core i7-12800H CPU, Nvidia's RTX 3080 Ti graphics with high power limit, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory, and a 17.3-inch 1440p 240Hz screen. But there are both lower and higher spec options for more or less money. You can check current prices with the links below. As is always the case with Razer's laptops, the solid metal CNC aluminum chassis feels great. Easily the best build quality as far as Windows-based gaming laptops are concerned. Aluminum is a softer metal, and in just a couple of weeks I found some silver spots in my anodized black finish that must have happened from subtle bumps. I've only been using this at home and haven't even attempted to travel with it or anything, so expect these to appear over time. We've still got the black and green Razer theme with the lid logo that lights up, and you can use software to change the lid between static, breathing, or off. The black finish is also a massive fingerprint magnet, however I also found it quite easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. The front has a little indent in the middle which makes it very easy to open the lid. There's not a whole lot of screen flex to the metal lid despite the wider 17-inch screen. The hinge feels solid and it's just satisfying to close the lid. There's only minimal flex to the keyboard area when pushing down hard. Perfectly sturdy during normal use. The laptop alone weighs under 2.8 kilos or 6.1 pounds and goes up to 3.65 kilos or 8 pounds with the included 280 watt power brick and cables. Like Razer's other laptops, it's on the slimmer side despite the high specs we've got inside. My Blade 17 has a MUX switch with advanced Optimus. The Razer sign-up software, the control panel for the laptop, advises us to use the Nvidia control panel to swap between the different modes. You can either use automatic select where the laptop will pick the best GPU based on the workload, force regular Optimus, or force only the Nvidia graphics to be used, all without a reboot. These options won't be available if you use the BIOS to only use the discrete Nvidia graphics though. Unfortunately, the spec sheet on the Razer website doesn't actually list whether or not they have advanced Optimus. A member of my Discord server recently bought the 4K 144Hz version and confirmed that while it does have a MUX switch, it does not have advanced Optimus. So it seems to depend on the panel. But as Razer's website doesn't specify, it means I don't know if the 1440p 165Hz or 1080p 360Hz panels offer advanced Optimus. It might just be this one with the 1440p 240Hz screen. I can't find out, and that's a problem. Razer, you need to list this on your website. Changing between the advanced Optimus modes was a little jarring as the color profile only seems to apply if the integrated graphics are active. You can't seem to set one in Windows when running off of the discrete graphics. I'm guessing this is Razer specific as it wasn't as obvious when changing on the Legion 5i Pro. The 17.3-inch screen has a few different options available, and at this size, honestly, I think a 1440p option makes the most sense for most people. My 240Hz panel has G-Sync, but none of the other options seem to offer this. My screen has an excellent color gamut, the contrast was average, and the brightness was just okay. 300 nits at max brightness is the minimum I want to see these days, and I would have liked to have seen higher. We're looking at a 6.9 millisecond average gray-to-gray response time, though for a 240Hz panel, we're looking for 4.16 milliseconds for all transitions to occur within the refresh window. It's not too bad compared to other laptops, but there are definitely faster panels with similar resolutions despite having slower refresh rates, such as these ones from Lenovo's Legion series. Screen response time is a factor that contributes to total system latency. This is the total amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fires on the screen in CSGO, and the Blade 17 is one of the better results compared to a lot of other laptops tested. Backlight bleed was fairly minor. There are some patchy spots, but not enough for me to actually notice it during regular use, but this will vary between each laptop. There's a 1080p camera above the screen in the middle, and it has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, which I found to work fast and accurately. This is what the camera and microphone look and sound like, and this is what it sounds like while I'm typing on the keyboard. The Blade 17 has a per-key RGB backlit keyboard, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. You can adjust the brightness through software, or with the F10 and F11 shortcut keys to 15 different brightness levels. More control sounds better, but I found it a bit annoying to press the keys so many times for subtle changes. Lighting and effects are controlled through the Razer Chroma software. There's no numpad, so the touchpad is centered with regards to the letter keys in the middle of the machine. Despite this, I never felt like the touchpad touchpad got in the way while typing. Typing felt fine. I liked typing on this laptop, though personally I prefer the clickier feel of the Legion 5i Pro. Despite the power button being right next to delete and backspace, and the fact that Windows 11's default is to put the system to sleep on a power button press, I found that you need to hold it for about half a second before it goes to sleep, so an accidental mispress when typing shouldn't do anything. The glass touchpad is big, very smooth, and feels great. But while testing this at the same time as Lenovo's Legion 5i Pro, personally I preferred the more accurate click on the Lenovo, but that's personal preference as my partner preferred the Blade, both for its touchpad and the keyboard. There are front-facing speakers on the left and right sides of the keyboard, as well as underneath on the left and right sides towards the front. I thought they sounded pretty great for a gaming laptop. They're not MacBook quality or anything, but there's some bass and they get fairly loud. Like pretty much every gaming laptop with Windows 11 I've covered this year, the Latencymon results weren't looking ideal. This didn't really seem to be due to any Razer-specific software and might just be how Windows 11 is by default. The left has the power input at the back, a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port facing the preferred way so you don't have to lift the laptop up to disconnect, two USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports, a Thunderbolt 4 Type C port, and a 3.5mm audio combo jack. The right has a UHS 2 SD card slot, a second Thunderbolt 4 Type C port, a third USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A port, HDMI 2.1 output, and Kensington lock right up the back. Both the left and right Type-C Thunderbolt 4 ports can be used to charge the laptop with up to 100 watts, and both also offer DisplayPort 1.4 support and connect directly to the NVIDIA graphics whether or not Optimus is enabled or disabled. The HDMI port also directly connects to the NVIDIA graphics, and although I confirmed that it does run an external screen at 4K 120Hz with G-Sync, it ran at 8-bit and not 10-bit. There's nothing on the back, and the front has a charge light towards the right, as well as that indent in the middle for opening. Getting inside was very easy, but only if you have the right tools. Just remove 10 TR5 screws, all the same length, and the bottom panel basically comes right off. The tools I use for opening laptops can be found in the video description. There are holes for airflow directly above all of the intake fans. Inside we've got the battery down the front, two M.2 storage slots above on the left and right sides, Wi-Fi 6E card just below the right M.2 slot, and two DDR5 4800 memory slots towards the center. Wi-Fi performance was decent. Killer or Intel options always seem to do better than Realtek or MediaTek options in my testing. If I actually had a 6E router, I'd expect it to be higher than most others ahead of it. The upgradeability score is the same as a number of other laptops, as we can upgrade both RAM sticks, two M.2 storage slots, and Wi-Fi. I took off half a point from ease of access because it's using TR5 screws and fewer people have bits for that. The Blade 17 is powered by an 82 watt-hour battery, 11.5 watt-hours higher than the Blade 17 I tested a couple of years ago, as they've just got one fan in the middle now instead of two, so presumably a bit more space for battery. The Razer software gives a fair bit of control over what happens when running on battery power. The performance mode gets forced to balanced, but you can set different keyboard brightness or lid logo lighting based on the charge level. There's also the option to press Function and R to swap between 60Hz and 240Hz refresh rates. But unlike ASUS laptops, this doesn't automatically change when you unplug the power. You can have it so that you're running at 60Hz in Windows, and then it will automatically change to 240 when Advanced Optimus changes the GPU when you load up a game. But this won't automatically change when you unplug, or for the models that don't have Advanced Optimus. I found the refresh rate change to give us an extra half an hour or so of runtime in my standard YouTube playback test, and using the discrete GPU instead of the integrated graphics was much worse as expected. You shouldn't need to do that with Advanced Optimus on the 240Hz 1440p configuration, as it will automatically change the GPU. But for the others with standard mux switch, that's what the difference will be if you can't be bothered rebooting after a game. It's not doing great compared to other laptops, and I double checked these results. To be fair, this year I started testing laptop battery life with the screens at 200 nits. In the past, I'd just arbitrarily set 50% brightness in Windows. However, to actually maintain 200 nits with the 1440p 240Hz panel, I needed to run these tests at 80% brightness. If I tested it the old way at 50%, it would have lasted a bit longer. But still, I wouldn't expect this to put it anywhere near the Ryzen options that dominate the top of the graph. Despite using a 280W power brick, Razer's GaN power adapter is a fair bit smaller compared to others, like say the 300W option Lenovo ships with their laptops. The power adapter can go in two different ways. One of these partially blocks the Ethernet port, so I guess just don't do that if you need to use it. Now, many of you have made me aware of the battery bloat issues that exist in Razer laptops. Unfortunately, this isn't really something I can comment on, as this is a brand new laptop that I've only been using for like 2 weeks. So unless the problem is going to present itself in that time, it's just unlikely to be something that I'm actually going to experience. Unfortunately, I'm just not able to do long-term testing, as I only get to borrow these for 2 to 3 weeks before sending them back. Now, that said, Razer do now have a 2-year warranty dedicated to the battery, which I can only assume means that either they've improved the battery, or they're confident that the number of machines that it will actually affect must be relatively low. I can't really say, it's just going to be one of those things that we'll have to wait and see. Let's check out thermals next. Both the CPU and GPU are covered by a vapor chamber cooler, and there aren't any air exhausts on the left or right sides of the laptop. All air is exhausted from the vents below the screen. The Razer Sign-Up software lets us change between different performance modes. We can set balance mode and optionally customize the fan speed, silent mode with no additional changes, or custom mode with the option of setting 4 different CPU modes and 3 different GPU modes. You can set these to whatever combination you like, and as we can't test everything, we've chosen to test with both modes set to low, medium, high, and then CPU on boost and GPU on high for full power. The temperatures were fine at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst case. Even in a worst case scenario though, we're not running too hot, barely cracking 90 degrees Celsius on the processor with custom mode set to high and above. The cooling pad that I test with, linked below the video, was able to lower temperatures by around 6 degrees Celsius. Setting max fan in balance mode was a little cooler than without it. These are the clock speeds for the same tests just shown. As expected, the higher modes are able to reach higher clock speeds and give us better performance. And that's why they're also hitting higher temperatures, because more power equals more heat. It's a trade-off. The CPU speeds are the same with or without the cooling pad, as thermals aren't a limitation. It's interesting that with the CPU set to its highest boost mode, that we're not seeing any difference in the CPU clock speeds. It's the same as having the CPU set to high. This is because custom mode set to high or boost limits the CPU to 45 watts when the GPU is also active, like in a game for example. These modes also allow the GPU to max out at 150 watts, though 165 watts in a GPU only test is possible with dynamic boost. To get the most out of the 1440p screen, I think it makes sense for the GPU to have more power budget rather than instead having a lower GPU limit but higher CPU limit. Silent mode or custom mode set to low for the CPU seem to cap the CPU to 25 watts, while balanced mode or custom set to medium increase it to 35 watts. In a CPU only workload like Cinebench though, the processor was able to run at 60 watts in the highest boost mode, so higher than the 45 watts when the GPU is also active. But the CPU power limit with all of the lower modes was the same as with the GPU also active. It's not doing great compared to other laptops. Yeah, the multi-core score is higher than most others, but that's simply due to Intel's 12th gen i7 being a 14-core 20-thread part. MSI's Crosshair 15 just ahead of it with 12700H is scoring slightly higher in multi-core, but also much higher in single-core. I'm not really sure why the 12800H was behind there. The only difference between it and the 12700H is that the 12800H has a 100 MHz higher boost clock, so where power limits aren't an issue, like single-threaded tests, I'd expect to see a higher single-core score. The performance drops back a fair bit when running on battery power, which seems to generally be the case with Intel laptops and is why older 8-core Ryzen options are now ahead. The drop-off to single-core performance in particular was far more compared to most other laptops tested. Balanced mode was the only option when running on battery power. You don't get any options to change it. The keyboard was around the usual low 30 degrees Celsius that I typically see when sitting there idle, though it still feels warmer to the touch due to the solid metal finish. It gets a little warmer with the stress tests running, but not hot to the touch. Balanced mode was fine too, so probably not a whole lot of point bothering with maxing the fan out. As we saw earlier, the internal temperatures were fine without it. Low plus low mode was mid-30s worst case, so only warm. Medium plus medium wasn't really a whole lot different, as the fans get louder to compensate for higher power limits. High plus high also doesn't change things too much. Likewise, as we saw earlier, boost plus high has the same power limits as high plus high, so no change is expected here. It's a bit warm in the middle, but not uncomfortable. The right side was cooler than the left, and the back is hot, but you don't need to touch there. Let's listen to the fan noise. The fans could be silent at idle, but from time to time they would kick in, which is why I've shown two different levels. Silent mode was quieter than custom mode set to low plus low, which was closer to balanced mode with the fans on auto mode. Interestingly, setting balanced mode to max fans wasn't technically max fans, as both high plus high and high plus boost modes ended up being louder. That makes sense given the custom modes both hit higher temperatures and higher power limits. Higher fan speeds are needed for that. What I don't understand is why we only get fan control in balanced mode, when balanced mode doesn't even need it because the power limits weren't high enough to trigger thermal throttling anyway, it was cool enough. If anything, this sort of additional customization makes sense in, well, custom mode. So not only do I want to see the fan control in custom mode, but I actually want it to let us max the fans out, because in balanced mode it's not doing that. Now let's find out how this year's Blade 17 actually performs in games and compares against other laptops. Cyberpunk 2077 was tested the same on all laptops, and I've got the Blade 17 shown by the red highlight. It's performing very well here, which is to be expected given we've got Nvidia's top-end RTX 3080 Ti graphics. But at the same time, it's only a few frames off other 3080 models from last year. We've got a different selection of laptops at the higher 1440p resolution, as we only test machines that actually have a chance of running it. Again, the Blade 17 is one of the better results, and basically the same as last year's 11th gen GE76, which is quite a bit thicker in comparison. Control is a fairly GPU heavy game, so it wasn't surprising to see the Blade 17 towards the top at 1080p, though its 1% low was behind the machines it's competing with, perhaps due to its lower CPU power limit. At the higher 1440p resolution, it's scoring the exact same average FPS as that larger and thicker GE76 from last year. Not quite as good as this year's 12th gen GE76, but hey, we're only like 3 FPS behind. Not exactly a difference you're likely to notice. Red Dead Redemption 2 was tested with the game's benchmark, but I think they changed the game a few months ago, so my older data may not be fairly comparable. Take the Zephyrus S17 from last year for example. It's doing better despite having a lower GPU and lower power limit. The issue becomes obvious at 1440p because the 11th gen GE76 is ahead of the newer 12th gen model. Again, the S17 still shows as ahead of the Blade 17, but I doubt that's the case. Unfortunately, I just can't get these previously tested models in again to update the results. But regardless, 90 FPS on the Blade 17 at 1440p high settings without even using DLSS is a nice result. Here are the 3D Mark results for those that find them useful. Now for some content creator tests. Adobe Premiere was tested with the Puget Systems benchmark, and the Blade actually scored 1073 at its best, but also as low as 912. This score is an average from 5 test runs. We normally only test 3 times, so there was quite a bit of variance. Regardless, it's still scoring very well compared to others. Adobe Photoshop was scoring more consistently, but also lower compared to a number of other 12th gen models tested that were ahead of it. Even some older 11th gen machines were doing better here. DaVinci Resolve is more GPU heavy, so that full-powered 3080 Ti would be helping here. But at the same time, it can't catch the lower spec Legion 5i Pro just ahead of it. The 5i Pro does have a higher CPU power limit when the GPU is idle, but if both CPU and GPU are active, both it and the Blade 17 have a 45 watt cap. So not sure why the Blade Blade is behind. I've also tested SpecViewPerf, which tests out various professional 3D workloads. Intel 12th Gen supports faster PCIe Gen 4 storage, and as a result, we're getting some of the best speeds that I've seen from a gaming laptop. The UHS-2 SD card slot was decent, but I've seen double the speed on other laptops. The SD card clicks in and sits most of the way into the machine, so no snapping your card with an accidental bump. There aren't a whole lot of options to change through the BIOS, just the basic minimal stuff that you'd expect any laptop to have. Others like Lenovo and especially MSI offer far more user customization, including power and thermal limit adjustments. Linux support was tested by booting an Ubuntu 21 Live CD. By default, the keyboard, touchpad, Ethernet, and camera worked. There wasn't any sound, and Wi-Fi didn't work out of the box on this OS. It probably just needs a driver installed. Shortcuts for keyboard brightness control still work, but not screen brightness. Let's discuss pricing and availability next. This will of course change over time, so refer to those links in the description for updates. At the time of recording, Razer's 12th Gen Blade 17 seems to start at $2,700 for the 3060 configuration, while the higher spec 3080 Ti option I've tested in this video seems to be $4,000, so quite a difference. The higher spec configurations definitely aren't cheap, but at the same time, Razer isn't exactly known as being a budget-friendly brand. Their more premium design just costs more money. So let's conclude by summarizing all of the good and bad parts of the Blade 17 to help you decide if it's a laptop you should consider buying. Gaming performance was excellent, as you'd expect with the specs in my unit combined with a muck switch. I'm actually kind of impressed that it's got a full-powered 3080 Ti in such a thin chassis, considering the thermals inside don't get too hot compared to most other laptops. That said, the metal chassis conducts heat, so it feels a bit warmer to the touch compared to other cheaper plastic options. But at the same time, it was never actually hot anywhere that you'd actually be touching. Now, the CPU power limit is capped to 45 watts when the GPU is also active, so like with a game running for example. And this is the same as many other laptops, like the Lenovo Legion 5i Pro I reviewed last week. However, the 12th Gen i7 in the Lenovo laptop can boost up to 90 watts in a CPU-only workload, while the i7 in the Blade 17 maxes out at 60 watts. And this means that CPU-intensive tasks may not perform as well on the Blade 17 compared to other options like that Legion laptop. In particular, I was quite surprised that the single-core performance was so low for a 12th Gen i7. I was definitely expecting better in that regard. Anyway, that said, this still is an improvement over previous Blade 17 laptops that I've tested, because many of those in the past have limited the CPU to 45 watts even in a CPU-only workload, so at least that's not the case here. The GAN power brick is smaller compared to most other gaming laptops despite still providing 280 watts. It's just more portable, and I hope more laptops adopt this. There are plenty of other great features here, like a good-looking screen, though this one doesn't get particularly bright, and the keyboard, touchpad, and speakers were all pretty good. Although my 1440p 240Hz screen has G-Sync, I don't think any of the other options do. At least that's listed on the Razer website. For some reason, they don't actually list which models have advanced Optimus, and I think that's a bit of a problem, especially considering that that's a feature that I legitimately think is going to be the future. And there are of course other negatives too, in addition to the high price tag. The battery life was quite poor, and although the machine feels solid and looks great, expect some silver dents in the black aluminum finish over time. It would also be nice if the refresh rate automatically changed to 60Hz when you unplug and run on battery, like ASUS, as it just makes the laptop run longer, and chances are if you're on battery, you don't need a high refresh rate. You're not going to be doing intensive gaming on battery power. Also, as far as software is concerned, I want to see fan control in the custom mode where it actually makes sense. Honestly, for most people, I don't think the RTX 3080 Ti graphics really make sense. Check out how it compares against the RTX 3070 Ti over here next. The difference in gaming performance isn't anywhere near as big as the price difference. Otherwise, make sure you're subscribed for future gaming laptop reviews like this one. I should also be getting Razer's new Blade 14 and 15 very soon.